How's it going, everybody? Remember to leave a like and also subscribe. So today we're obviously going to be talking about the Terry Rozier case, Chauncey Billups case, and of course Tim Donahue and everything that's going to happen from here on out with the NBA. Adam Silver went on Pat McAfee, and he basically said that he did some damage control before any of this came out. I think it was like a day before all of this stuff came out about Terry Rozier, Chauncey Billups, etc. And it's funny because I was saying that basically um, that there is something to be said. Let's just put it this way. I brought up the point to a lot of my friends, family, whatever. They kind of laughed it off, where I said that the NBA, or not just the NBA, but sports in general, um, is kind of is so tied to a 135 billion dollar industry, and we all know what that industry is. That's pretty much centered in Las Vegas. Okay, and I said it's certain outcomes of certain games could be persuaded. Again, putting it a certain way. Okay. Um, Now I'm not saying that is 100% the case all the time. It's not even halfway true. Okay, but there's something to be said about a $135 billion industry. All right, being tied in with Major League sports. And now all this stuff came out. Terry Rozier with not Tim Donahue. That already came out back in the early 2000s. But even before that, of course, yeah, Tim Donahue, the Kings versus Lakers, Game 6, 2002, Western Conference Finals. Go rewatch that. It's definitely worth a rewatch for sure. At least the highlights are. The questionable calls, the Mike Bibby elbow, the Kobe Bryant elbow to Mike Bibby. It pretty much tells you all you need to know about what happened in that particular game and potentially others. And now this. And now you have Terry Rozier, who, if you watch the highlights, more than likely was taking unders, for, whatever they're accusing him of. Okay? Making sure he got the under. Allegedly, of course. But you need to understand, okay, when it comes to basically professional sports and the NBA itself, because it's funny because there were two things here. There were kind of two sides of the coin, if you will, where we knew about the Tim Donahue thing. We knew about all that. We knew about Tim Donahue. We knew that that the NBA had a really serious problem back then, and a very serious possibility that it could still something like that could still be going on potentially. Okay, not just with the NBA. You look at Calvin Ridley and how he was suspended about like a year, in the NFL. All right, for something somewhat similar, kind of the same vein. All right, but at the same time though, you have a great opening for Wemby. You have a great opening for the Rockets versus Thunder, which I personally watch. I'm a huge fan of the NBA. Okay, you have all that stuff. You have Kevin Durant. You have on the Rockets, and you're not really it's in the back of your mind that there's a $135 billion industry that's tied in with professional sports. You have that all in the back of your mind, which at least I do. Some people laugh it off. Some people laugh off the fact that the WNBA coach for the Minnesota Lynx last year said that game was rigged in Game 6, and if you listen, Game 7, I mean, and if you listen to it on the radio or if you watch the highlights or whatever, like I did, and you say, there's something going on in this game, where the Minnesota Lynx probably had a bunch of chances to win that game, but there were certain calls that were against them. Okay, you take all that and you watch the NBA games that were just on the past couple of days, and you say, the NBA is a lot of interesting stuff is happening. They could possibly get, they could possibly be, better, or they could possibly have more fans in the next 20, 30 years than Major League Baseball. NBA 2K is one of the best video games, one of the hottest selling video games. especially for younger people. The NBA has a much younger fan base, a really hyped fan base, and things are exciting. Were definitely happening with the NBA before all this, and now all this stuff happens with Scary Terry Rozier, and which is actually his nickname, Scary Terry, and he's definitely having a very scary Halloween, is he not? For his sake, facing like 25 years in prison. And you also have the Chauncey Billups thing. You have, of course, the Tim Donahue thing way back then is now all of a sudden being rehashed, and why not? Um, and you have all this, and then overnight, then all that stuff about the NBA possibly, surpassing the Major League Baseball or, whatever, at least in the United States for the second, biggest sport, in terms of viewership and all that stuff. All that is wiped. It is wiped away overnight. When I watch an NBA game now, not in the back of my mind, but the front of my mind, is something going on here? What is there something going on with Durant? Is he actually injured? Is, like why is, this is a real story, by the way. Why is Kyrie Irving standing up when they say he has an ankle injury? During the Milwaukee Bucks a couple, however many years ago in the playoffs. What's going on here? There's the Minnesota Lynx versus the New York Liberty. Why is that particular player, the best foul line shooter or whatever in the WNBA, missing foul shots? I'm not saying on purpose, but her going to the line 3 times for the referees sending her to the line for questionable calls 3 times in Game 7 of the WNBA Finals last year. Now all that stuff, okay, is front and center. It was always somewhat front and center for me personally for certain games. But now you think about the NBA especially, and you go, what else is there? Is there more? Who else is involved? Are there more players? Tim Donahue said this is the tip of the iceberg. Is that true? So all this stuff is it's very scary for the NBA. For the NBA fan, it's especially like the diehard NBA fan, it is horrific. I'm not saying, by the way, that Terry Rozier isn't everyone who's responsible, okay, for all this, justice will be served. Okay, I'm not saying any of that it's not a bad thing in that regard. Justice will be served. Okay, if Terry Rozier was actually basically failing on purpose, missing shots on purpose to get an under, okay, then justice will be served. That is the worst thing you can do. Okay, it is the worst thing you can do if you were a sports player. Okay, any sort of professional athlete, it is the worst thing you can do. So we'll see what happens. But for now, the NBA has a serious morale problem with the fan. Okay, with the fan who's in Vegas. Okay, if you know what I'm saying, and the NBA player. There's a lot of real, and especially Adam Silver and the back offices and everything like that, ownership, everything across the board. The NBA for right now is screwed.